Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're laser focused on a collection of really interesting updates.
Mm,
And a key piece is an audio recording we have from Blockchain DXB dated April 10th, 2025.
right.
Our mission basically is to cut through the noise, pull out the crucial insights, those market-moving events and fascinating shifts happening right now in crypto and blockchain.
That's right. We've definitely got a packed agenda today. We're looking at everything from, well, how global trade policies are shaking things up to brand new ways you might actually use your crypto.
Okay, let's get straight into it then. Our source points to several major areas we need to unpack. First up, President Trump's just announced tariffs on China.
And that pause he's given other nations, which is interesting.
Exactly. And then we'll look at how this news almost instantly rippled through Bitcoin and the wider crypto markets.
Yeah, the reaction was fast.
Following that, we'll tackle the big one, the upcoming CPI data. That's the inflation figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS.
And what kind of punch that could pack for the market, that's huge.
Definitely.
And that's really just the beginning, isn't it? We also have Kraken's fresh partnership with Mastercard,
Ah, yes, the debit cards in Europe.
rolling out crypto debit cards across Europe, yeah. Which, really makes you think about how crypto is fitting into our everyday lives. Or trying to.
Absolutely. Plus, 21 Shares is teaming up with House of Doge.
The Dogecoin ETP, right.
It launched the very first Dogecoin ETP that's an exchange-traded product. We should probably stress it's distinct from the ETFs we often hear about.
Good point. That difference matters, and we'll touch on why.
And we've also got some intriguing partnership news coming out of Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Focus on shaking up financial markets. Some significant tech funding, too.
Then we'll kind of zoom out for a snapshot of the global crypto market as it stood around, April 10th, 11th of last year?
Yeah, based on the source.
Talking market sentiment, the flow of stablecoins, what's happening in DeFi, and, the performance of key assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge.
And even those real-world asset tokens.
Right. RWAs.
Okay. And because it's so crucial these days, we'll also be looking at potential noise around inflation data, in the mainstream media.
Oh, definitely. And why going directly to the BLS, the source itself, is so vital.
Absolutely. Finally, we'll dig into a listener question about the practical side.
Yeah.
Where and how might we actually spend crypto if we could use it anywhere?
Fun question.
Yeah. So, no time to waste. Let's dive in, shall we?
Sounds good. Let's kick things off with those tariffs. What exactly did President Trump announce, and, what was the immediate reaction we saw?
So this was interesting. Literally hours before our source's recording on April 10th, 2025, President Trump dropped a pretty significant trade bomb. Tariffs on China jumping to a massive 125%.
Wow.
But here's the curveball. He also announced a 90-day timeout on tariffs for other countries. About 75 of them, I think.
Yeah, the source mentioned around 75 countries that were open to striking a deal.
Right. So a bit of carrot and stick there.
What's fascinating, though, is how the crypto market reacted.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, right?
Instantly.
It seems the reaction was quite positive, a noticeable upward swing.
Exactly. Our source specifically points out that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies saw a significant jump in price. Bitcoin, in particular, surged from around $77,000.
To over $83,000. Yeah, I saw that number.
After the announcement. That's not a small move, especially in, hours.
No, it's substantial, which begs the question, why? Why this positive reaction in crypto? You'd think tariffs, especially on China, would inject uncertainty, maybe panic.
That's the puzzle, isn't it? Our source wonders if the stock market would follow suit, maybe see it as a strong negotiating tactic, the art of the deal thing.
Right.
But as for why crypto loved it, maybe the market saw it as decisive action in a world of economic wobbles.
Or maybe. Could it be a flight to perceived safety? Like, if these policies weaken fiat currencies eventually, does Bitcoin look better as a hedge?
That's a really compelling point.
Yeah.
A sort of digital safe haven narrative playing out in real time during trade upheaval.
Could be. And our source also mentioned China's potential response. They assessed the chance of immediate strong retaliation as slim.
Okay, so maybe the lack of expected negative reaction from China also helped calm the nerves.
Yeah, that might have contributed to the positive sentiment we saw in crypto, too.
Right. So a major trade policy shift and an immediate thumbs up from the crypto world. Okay. Now, the next big event everyone was holding their breath for was the CPI data release.
Ah, yes, inflation numbers.
Ah.
Always critical.
Why was this particular economic indicator so crucial at that moment?
Well, if we zoom out a bit, the CPI data telling us about inflation, it's just a really key barometer for the economy's health, isn't it?
Mm,
Central banks, investors, everyone watches it closely because it often dictates monetary policy, interest rates, quantitative easing, all that stuff.
right.
So for crypto and traditional markets too, inflation numbers signal where interest rates might go, the general economic stability, and that heavily impacts how people value assets.
Exactly. And our source really stressed, going straight to the source for this data, the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, www.bls.gov.
Absolutely crucial.
He cautioned against just, taking mainstream media's headlines at face value.
That's just golden advice these days, isn't it? Understanding the original source, seeing if it's been filtered or spun, it's critical.
So, based on this crucial CPI data release, what were the two main scenarios the market was bracing for?
Essentially, two key paths. If the inflation numbers came in lower than expected, suggesting price increases were cooling off,
Okay.
the potential upside for Bitcoin was seen as really significant. Our source even floated the possibility, maybe a bit optimistically, of Bitcoin hitting $100,000 if that happened.
Wow, $100 K. That's a bold target. So, lower inflation, potentially rocket fuel for Bitcoin?
Potentially.
What about the other scenario? What if inflation stayed high or even ticked up?
Well, on the flip side, if the CPI data showed persistent or rising inflation, the outlook was considerably less rosy. This could put downward pressure not just on Bitcoin and crypto, but likely on the stock market too. Higher inflation might prompt central banks to get more aggressive, hike rates further maybe.
Yeah, cool down the economy.
Exactly.
It's also important to remember, as our source pointed out, that the March inflation data wouldn't reflect any impact from these brand new tariffs yet.
Precisely. That's a lag effect, something that would play into future readings.
The economic picture is always shifting, isn't it?
Yeah.
These data points are just snapshots.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about this Kraken and Mastercard development. What's the scoop there?
Okay, so Kraken, major crypto exchange,
Mm-hmm.
announced a partnership with Mastercard. They're launching both physical and digital crypto debit cards across Europe.
Okay, that sounds big.
And what's really potentially game-changing is these cards will let users spend crypto and even stable coins
Stablecoins too, interesting.
at over 150 million merchants worldwide. Basically, anywhere MasterCard is accepted.
Wow. That's a massive leap for real-world usability, isn't it?
Huge.
Suddenly, the crypto in your wallet could actually buy groceries, coffee, whatever, at a vast network of places. It really starts to bridge that gap between digital assets and, well, normal commerce.
Totally. And Kraken mentioned something like 200,000 of their users already activated what they call a Kraktag.
Kraktag. Okay.
Apparently, it's a unique identifier that will streamline access to this new spending feature. The goal seems pretty clear. Make crypto practical for regular everyday spending.
But what I found interesting was the slightly more nuanced take from our source.
Oh, yeah.
While acknowledging the obvious convenience for users, they also sort of wondered, is this a bit of a step back from crypto's original online peer-to-peer idea?
That's a fair point. Working within the existing financial rails.
Yeah. Is this a necessary compromise for mainstream adoption, even if it means using MasterCard's network? What do you think?
That's a really good question. It's almost like a recognition that for crypto to get truly widespread use, maybe it needs to integrate with the existing infrastructure, even if that wasn't the initial purely decentralized dream. Making it as easy as a debit card definitely lowers the barrier for people who find crypto maybe a bit daunting right now.
Exactly. It just highlights that ongoing evolution, doesn't it? Crypto finding its path towards broader acceptance and utility.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to the Dogecoin story. What's this about an ETP?
Right. So 21 Shares, they're collaborating with House of Doge
Okay.
to launch the very first Dogecoin ETP,
Yeah.
exchange-traded product. And our source really made sure to emphasize this is different from an ETF.
Right. Common in Europe, ETPs can have different structure.
Exactly. Think of it like a security that tracks Dogecoin's price, but you can trade it on regular stock exchanges.
So what makes this launch significant? Who's backing it? Where's it trading?
Well, first off, it's got the official stamp of approval from the Dogecoin Foundation itself.
Okay, that adds some legitimacy.
Definitely. And this Doge ETP is set to list on 6 different exchanges, ticker symbol DOGE. Crucially, it's described as 100% physically backed.
Meaning they actually hold the underlying Dogecoin?
Precisely. Not just a derivative tracking the price. And this also opens up a way for institutional investors to get Dogecoin exposure, which is, well, Kind of a big deal for Doge.
Yeah, that's potentially huge for institutional access and the market reaction. Was their classic Doge pump.
Oh, you know it. Our source reported a significant price pump, over 15% following the announcement.
Wow.
Oh,
Just goes to show, right, the power of community and sentiment, especially with meme coins.
absolutely.
It really highlights that interesting duality in crypto. Serious tech innovation alongside assets driven largely by, well, internet culture.
Yeah,
This ETP could actually boost Dogecoin's credibility, maybe lead to more mainstream adoption, even though it started as, basically a joke.
exactly. It's fascinating to watch. Okay, let's pivot now to the Middle East. Some interesting stuff happening there, starting with that partnership in Dubai,
Yes, Finstreet Limited signing a memorandum of understanding with 91.
which is a huge global investment manager, right? Like $163 billion in assets under management at the end of 2024.
That's substantial. So what's the focus of this collaboration?
The main goal is exploring opportunities and fostering innovation within financial markets. Specifically, they're looking at creating and trading structured products.
Okay, packaged investments.
Yeah, and exchange-aided products, private debt instruments.
Direct loans to companies.
Right. And, very relevant here, integrating blockchain technology into all this.
So it really sounds like traditional finance is increasingly seeing blockchain's potential for efficiency, new product types.
Seems like it. The aim is to develop and trade these sophisticated financial instruments, and they plan to list them on the FPRI global market eventually.
Okay.
It's all geared towards meeting this growing investor demand for more complex, tailored solutions. And our source highlighted Finstreet's vision of really embedding blockchain into TradFi, making market access more innovative.
That's a strong signal, isn't it? That convergence we keep talking about between traditional finance and blockchain tech.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, what about the news from Saudi Arabia? A tech grant.
That's right, Lucidia, described as an AI-powered customer experience management platform.
Okay.
They secured a pretty significant grant, 5 million Saudi Riyal from Saudi Arabia's National Technology Development Program.
Which is roughly, what, $1.3 million US?
About that.
And what's the purpose of this funding? What does it tell us about Saudi Arabia's tech ambitions?
The grant is specifically to accelerate Lucidia's expansion across the region, not just in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, wider reach.
And more broadly, this National Technology Development Program, it's a key part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 goals, their big push for digital transformation.
Right.
Our source emphasized this kind of investment really shows Saudi Arabia's serious commitment to becoming a hub for cutting-edge tech like AI.
It's fascinating seeing these strategic moves, isn't it? Investments, partnerships across different regions, all pointing towards greater tech and finance integration globally.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's zoom out. Let's take that snapshot of the global crypto market as it looked around April 10th, 11th last year, based on our source's data. What were the headline numbers? Key trends.
Well, the big one was the global market cap. It had seen a substantial jump, reaching $2.65 trillion.
Up from $2.43 trillion the day before.
Exactly. That clearly reflects that positive reaction to the tariff news we talked about earlier.
Makes sense. And trading activity. Did volume surge too?
Oh, yeah. The 24-hour trading volume was up dramatically, hit $174.58 billion,
Wow.
which is a massive 58.72% increase compared to the previous day. So, yeah, confirms a lot of market action following that Trump announcement.
Okay. What about the breakdown? Stablecoins versus DeFi.
Stablecoin volume was remarkably high, $165.20 billion.
Get out.
Yeah, accounting for a huge 92.41% of the total crypto market's 24-hour volume.
92%.
Tether's USDT still dominating that space, biggest share of that volume.
Okay. And DeFi.
In DeFi, while the absolute dollar volume was up, its percentage of the total volume was around 46.41%. Total value locked, or TVL, in DeFi was $90.75 billion. Allah was leading there.
90% stablecoin volume is. That's really high. What does that usually suggest?
Well, it often indicates a degree of caution, maybe, or perhaps traders moving profits into stable assets or waiting on the sidelines.
Right?
So while prices surged, a lot of the activity might have been taking profits or just parking cash, waiting for clearer signals before jumping back into more volatile stuff.
Gotcha. Our source also mentioned a shift in dominance between centralized and decentralized exchanges. CEX versus DX. What's happening there?
Yeah, interesting trend. Centralized exchanges like Binance, Coinbase, they actually saw an increase in their dominance. More trading happening there.
Okay.
Conversely, volumes on decentralized exchanges, Uniswap, PancakeSwap, etc., had actually decreased during that same period.
So the immediate reaction maybe favored the big established platforms.
Yeah.
Easier fiat on-ramps, maybe?
That's a likely reason, yeah. Easier for potentially new capital reacting to the news to get in via CEXs.
Makes sense. And the major players, Bitcoin, Ethereum, how are they looking? Market cap, volume?
Ethereum's market cap had climbed back over $200 billion, hitting $233 billion. Bitcoin stood at a commanding $1.65 trillion.
Still king.
Definitely. Looking at 24-hour volume, Bitcoin saw $1.31 billion. But Ethereum had a notably higher volume at $39.39 million.
Whoa, hold on. Ethereum's volume was that much higher than Bitcoin's, despite the lower market cap.
Yeah, significantly higher in that 24-hour snapshot.
Interesting. What might drive that? More active trading, speculation?
Could be any of those. Maybe more active trading, higher speculative interest in ETH at that moment, perhaps related to upcoming network upgrades or stuff happening in the dApp ecosystem. Who knows?
Yeah.
In terms of market dominance, Bitcoin held 62.50%. Ethereum was at 7.60%.
Okay. And the rest of the market? Altcoins, meme coins, those RWA tokens?
Our source noted that in the hour leading up to their recording, it was actually altcoins and meme coins showing the strongest immediate upward price momentum.
The faster movers.
Exactly. And looking at real-world asset tokens by market cap, the leaders mentioned were Chainlink, Avalanche, Hedera Hashgraph, Manta, and Ondo.
Got it. Finally, the 7-day price changes. Overall picture.
Across the board, the 7-day changes were showing green, positive growth.
Okay.
Indicating the market had generally been trending up over the past week, which, as the source noted, is probably quite a contrast to how things looked right after Trump's initial tariff news back on April 2nd.
Right. Highlights just how fast sentiment can shift in crypto. Wild swings.
Absolutely. Volatility is the name of the game.
Okay. Now, let's dig into this really important point our source raised about, well, potential misinformation around inflation data.
Yes, this is crucial.
What did they uncover there?
Well, first, our source strongly urged listeners to rely on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, BLS.gov, as the definitive source for CPI data, the primary source.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Always.
Then they highlighted a specific example. Mainstream media, specifically the Associated Press, apparently used a report from a different agency, the Bureau of Economic Analysis,
Okay.
with a headline that could have easily been misread to suggest higher inflation. But the kicker was, the data in that BEA report didn't even include figures from 2025.
Wait, really? They ran a headline suggesting higher inflation using data that didn't include the current year.
According to our source, yes, that was the issue. A pretty significant disconnect.
Yeah, that sounds problematic.
Yeah.
What potential reason could there be for reporting inflation based on outdated data like that?
Well, our source speculated, and it is speculation, that some outlets, maybe with a particular viewpoint, might want to push a narrative of rising inflation. Perhaps to align with certain political takes or criticize current economic policies. They even suggested these same outlets might, conveniently shift sources again if the actual BLS numbers came out low just to fit whatever narrative they wanted.
Wow. So the big takeaway is just be critical. Exercise critical thinking when consuming news, especially economic data.
Absolutely.
Always try to track down the primary source if you can. Don't just read the headline.
Exactly. We have access to so much original information now. Taking that extra step to check sources, cross-reference, understand context, it's vital, especially with market-sensitive stuff like inflation.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, let's tackle that listener question we got from Darren.
Right.
He asked, if you could spend crypto anywhere, where would you be most excited to use it first, and which crypto would you pick? What was our source's personal take?
It was a really interesting kind of personal reflection. Our source admitted they see Bitcoin as having the most fundamental transformative potential. So conceptually, they lean towards Bitcoin over others.
Okay, the big one.
However, they also expressed a real reluctance to actually spend their Bitcoin.
Ah, the HO dealer mentality.
Exactly. Viewing it more as a long-term store of value, digital gold.
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Don't spend the Bitcoin.
Precisely. So for regular purchases, their preference would actually be to convert altcoins into stablecoins.
Ah, okay. Use the alts for spending fuel.
Convert them to stablecoins and use those, because of the price stability. Removes the volatility risk for just buying everyday stuff.
Makes sense.
And they did note that Kraken's new debit card could certainly make that kind of spending much more seamless in everyday situations.
Right. Connects the dots. Did they have any specific examples, like dream crypto purchases?
They offered a couple more aspirational, maybe slightly funny examples, like using Bitcoin for big life experiences, travel, adventures, that kind of thing.
Okay, the bucket list items.
Yeah. But the more practical point was For routine spending, dining out, shopping, electronic stablecoins would likely be the choice.
Got it.
And they specifically mentioned preferring Circle's USDC over Tether's USDT as their stablecoin of choice.
Interesting preference noted. Did they mention seeing crypto accepted anywhere already?
Yeah, just a brief anecdote. Mentioned a grocery store in Dubai called Day-to-Day Care or something similar that apparently already accepts crypto.
Huh. So it is happening.
Yeah.
Little packets of adoption.
Exactly. It just highlights that ongoing evolution, doesn't it? How we might use digital currencies, balancing that store of value idea with, just buying groceries.
Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of this deep dive. A really dynamic set of information we went through today.
Definitely covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, from those immediate market ripples of Trump's tariffs, the intense anticipation around CPI data, to the expanding ways crypto might get used with those debit cards and the first Doge ETP.
And the partnerships, the market snapshot.
And that critical reminder, always question your sources, seek out the original data. Can't stress that enough.
Indeed. It's been a fascinating snapshot of a landscape that's just moving incredibly fast.
It really is. So here's a final thought maybe for listeners to chew on. Considering the speed of all these developments we talked about today, the interplay of global politics, economics, tech, and crypto and blockchain, what unforeseen applications or market shifts might we see just in the next few months as these trends keep playing out?
Good question.
And how might this ongoing convergence of traditional finance and blockchain further reshape how we interact with our finances in ways we maybe can't even predict right now?
Definitely a space to watch closely. Lots more to unfold, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this deep dive.